Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Let's crack real math. My name is Viraaj, and in this video we'll be having a look at direct and inverse proportionality. So please, before we begin, do not forget to perform an LSS, that is like, share and subscribe, and without further ado, let's start. So before we dive into examples, let's actually see what I mean by direct. Okay, let's just use another color. Yep. Direct and indirect. Of course, both of these in terms of proportionality. When I say something is direct, I mean, for example, let's say A is directly proportional to B. This symbol here represents proportionality. And something indirect, let me say A is indirectly proportional to B. As you can see, the difference between the two is that in one, B is over 1, and in the other, B is in indirect, B is under 1, and in direct, B is all by itself. In direct, if A increases, this simply means B increases as well. So let's say maybe A becomes 6, B will become 4. If A becomes 10, B will become 5. Again, these are all examples and estimates. Of course, they are not accurate because they are not real questions. But in whatever case, in direct, both of them would increase if they're increasing, or both of them would decrease if one is decreasing. However, in indirect, it's the opposite. If A is increasing, that means B should be decreasing, and likewise, if A is decreasing, B should be increasing. Now, this is how it means in layman terms, but when you're solving questions, what you have to do is you have to make an equation. So let's say, again, A is directly proportional to B. The equation you would have to make to solve this is A equals to K into B. Now you can see that we've introduced K, and what is K? K is nothing but merely a constant, which we will use as a beacon point in getting the final answer. Because in most questions you will be given A and you will be given a certain value of B. So then you find K, and then with that value of K you now find the next value of either B or either A, which they would give. Similarly, in terms of indirect, if we say again A is indirectly proportional to B, the equation we would form over here is simply A equals to K over B. And again, to start with, they would give you your B, you'd give you your A, you would solve for K, and then use that K to solve the next part of the question. Again, K here is just a constant. You can use any other letter, but in mathematical terms it is most advisable to use K as that is most known to people. So let's have a look at our first example. So first example says C is directly proportional to the cube root of D. When C is 32, D is 8. Find D when C is 16. So that is a lot of information, so let's take it one after the other. It says C is directly proportional to the cube root of D. So we already have something like this. C is directly proportional to the cube root of D. Again, cube root would have a 3 over here because it's not square root, it's cube root. Now it says when C is 32, that means when C is 32, D is meant to be 8. Find D when C is 16. Now this is where our constant K comes into. We know that all of this that we've written, if it's in equation form, it's something like C equals to K into the cube root of D. Now to start with, they've given us both the values, the first two values of C and D. So let's put those values into this equation and solve for K. And then using that K with the value of C they've given, then we can find D. So let's do that first. So we have 32, which is our C they gave, equals to K, which is the constant we're trying to find, into the cube root of d, and d is 8. So upon doing this, we know 32 is simply 2k, because the cube root of 8 is 2, and 2 times k is 2k. And solving this, we know k is 16, because 32 divided by 2, as you go to the other side, becomes 16. Now that we have our k, we can find our d with this value of k and this value of c that they gave. So again, forming our equation, we have c equals to k into the cube root of d. Our c is given as 16 in the second time around, which is here, so 16 equals to k, which is also 16, into the cube root of d. We know that when we're solving for d, this would now become cube root of d equals 1, because 16 divided by 16 would give you 1, and to find d, we would do 1 to the power of 3. Why 1 to the power of 3? Because if you take this cube root to the other side, it becomes to the power of 3. Similarly, if it was the fourth root, it would become 1 to the power of 4. And we know that that 1 to the power of 3 is nothing but 1. So this is your answer for the first question, that your d is 1 when your c is 16. And again, the k, the markers or examiners might not necessarily look at your answer for k, but we know its importance because it's because of that k you're able to find the d. Sometimes if this is a question of perhaps, let's say 4 marks, for finding k by itself you may have gotten 2 marks. So as always, it's very important that you know what you're doing in finding your k. Next example. Okay, let's just drag it a bit. Okay, we have p is directly proportional to the q. When p is 14, q is 5. Find q when p is 6. So let's form what it's trying to say. Let's write it in mathematical terms. It says p is simply directly proportional to q. So that was a bit easier to understand. Now it says when p is 14, q is 5. So forming our equation, we know this is simply p equals to k into q. Do remember that we are still working in directly proportional in this question. So substituting your values, you know 14 equals to 5k. Why 14? Because that's the first value of p given, and why 5k? Because q is 5 and 5 times k is 5k. And solving for k, you know, k is 14 over 5, and if I'm not wrong, that's 2.8. So let's just have a quick check. Yep, it is 2.8. So your k is 2.8. Now it said find q when p is equal to 6. So again, using the same equation we made, now we have p equals to k into q. This time we're trying to find q, but we have p to be 6, so 6 equals to 2.8q. Why 2.8? Because that is our k we found over here. And why 6? Because that's the second value of p they gave right here. And upon solving for q, you know q is 6 divided by 2.8. Doing that, you get 2.14 to 2 decimal places, or you can simply write it in terms of the fraction form that's there, that is 15 over 7. But be careful, if it does this, write it in terms of mixed fraction and not an improper fraction. All you have to do is convert this to a mixed fraction, and converting this to a mixed fraction, that should be 2 into 1 over 7. Let's just have a quick confirmation about that. 1 over 7. Yep, that is it. And that is your final answer for this question. Again, we use the k to find our final answer for q. Let's move on to the next example. So in this question, we are being told that x is inversely proportional okay, let's just not write that. Okay, x is inversely proportional to the square of y. When x is 2, y is 5. Find x when y is root 10. Now let's write this properly. We know it says x is inversely proportional to the square root of y. Now when we are writing inversely proportional, this is 1, and it says square of y. Take note, not square root but square of y, so that means this is y squared. Now it says when x is 2, y is 5. So we know that forming an equation out of this, we have x is equal to k all over y squared. So using this, let's substitute our x over here and our y over here. So upon doing that, we now have 2 is equal to k over 25. Why 25? Because if you take 5 over here, you'll square the 5, and 5 times 5 is 25, and y 2 because that is your x value. Sorry, x is 2 because that is your x value. And now you know that upon cross multiplying, you know this is a 1 over here because there's nothing there, so you know k is simply 2 times 25, and that is k is 50. Now that you have your k value, it says find x when y is root 10. So forming our equation once again, that's x equals to k over y squared, and substitute our values. So we know that x, x is equal, just a second, x is equal to our k, which is 50 over root 10 squared. You know that the root and the square power cancel out, so now you just have 50 all over 10, and 50 divided by 10 is nothing but 5. So your x is 5 when your y is root 10. And as you can see again, we had to use the k equals to 50, the k value, the constant value, to find the answer. Proceeding to the next example, we have c is inversely proportional to the cube root of d. When c is 4, d is 8. Find d when c is 2. So let's take it step by step. We have c is inversely proportional to the cube root of d, so that means it's the cube root of d. So forming an equation out of this, we know we have c equals to k over cube root of d. Substituting our values of c and d, we know this is something like 4 equals to k, Microsoft whiteboard just acting up, sorry. Okay, we know that this is something similar to 4 equals to k over the cube root of 8, which is 2, and upon cross multiplication you will see that your k is equal to 8. Now that you have your k, it's time to find your value of d when c is 2. So forming the equation again, we have c equals to k over root 3 of d. Putting your values in, we know c is 2 as specified in the question. 2 equals to 8 over the cube root of d. That's what we're trying to find. So doing this question, if you cross multiply, you know that 3 root d into 2 equals to 8. 3 root d equals to 4, because 2 would go to the other side and divide that by 8, so that would be 4. And d is 4 to the power of 3. Why to the power of 3? Because it was root 3 over here, and take it to the other side, it will become to the power of 3. and doing that we know that 4 to the power 3 is 64. So your D is 64 when your C is 2. And moving on to the final question for today. This is a bit longer question in terms of word problems, and this is another challenge question. Challenge question. So please do pause the video and have an attempt on this by yourself, and then resume the video to see if you get it correct. Now, the question says the number of days in D to complete a bedroom renovation is inversely to the square of the number of workers in terms of W. It takes 25 days for 2 workers to complete it. Calculate to the nearest day how long it would take 10 workers to complete the job. Now this looks like it's a tough question, but let's take it step by step. We know that we're meant to represent days with D and workers with W. And it said that the number of days, which is D, to complete a bedroom renovation is inversely to the square of the number of workers. So I can see that we have something like D is inversely proportional to the square of W. Why is it like this? Because I know it said inversely, and I know it said the number of days in D is inversely proportional to the square of the number of workers in W, and that is why this is squared over here and not square root. Now, it says it takes 25 days for 2 workers to complete it. This is simply telling that when D is equal to 25, our W is equal to 2. Knowing that, when we form our equation, we know this is something like 25 equals to K over 2 squared, which is 25 equals to K over 4. Sorry, okay, 25 equals to K over 4. And upon solving K, you know K is 25 times 4 due to cross multiplication, and doing that you should get K is 100. Now that we know our K, we can solve the answer to this question, because it said calculate to the nearest day. That means it's telling us to find D, how long it will take 10 workers. So basically calculate D when W is 10. So forming our equation again, we have D, that's what we're trying to find, equals to our K, which we got as 100, all over to the square of 10. That's 10 squared equals to, doing this, you know this is 100 over 100, because 10 squared is 100, 10 times 10, and you know that this is equal to 1. So when W is 10, your D is simply 1. And that is the final answer for that question. As you can see, it was a bit tricky in terms of the way they worded it, but if you look at it carefully, you can extract all the important information, which in this case is inversely to the square of the number of workers, 25 days, 2 workers, how many days for 10 workers. And they might have gotten confused by them saying the number of days and the number of workers, but they just said that so that you can represent that, you know that you should represent the days with D and the workers with W to find the final answer. So thank you for watching this video, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Do not forget to perform an LSS, that is like, share and subscribe. Please comment any questions or any feedback you may have in this comment section below, and thank you for watching, guys. Have a nice one.